Welcome, I suppose. I want to start by I want to start by getting through my own sort of perception of this topic. When you begin to look at the world and you try to approach certain topics with as much clarity um, and as much conscious decision with what you're looking at and operating around. And I've been trying to get to a certain new idea, right? With just as Alfred North Whitehead. Not I will say I'm not read a lot, but I know of his work. Um, he has a book called The Adventure of Ideas, and just that phrasing alone, to me, I when you dive into certain topics, it's a you have to isolate your point of view towards um, selected variables around that topic. Now, for me, as I've dove into my creative process and my work product, just kind of getting uh, through certain ideas, I find myself trying to adventure through multiple ones at once to kind of form this whole. Um, for instance, I'm very big into certain imagination, create um, imaginative. Is that even a word? Imaginative. That's how you say it. Obviously, it's late. I'm up working, um, but I like diving into fantasy, imagination worlds where there's obviously certain laws that are completely individual to the world, right? Now, as I ventured through these multiple different areas, which I'm talking about anywhere from, a very scientific sort of perspective to a very imaginative perspective or creative perspective, where laws are broken, into you know politics, into different philosophy ideas. Um, it varies, right? But the key thing for me is bridging all of them together into this adventure of kind of going through ideas. And I think what that's kind of getting me to, I wrote this yesterday or the day before. I wrote, "The mind repeats itself in what you know, but it is infinite in being curious." I think when you have curiosity in everything as you seek the world, you are open to learning and trying to comprehend and understand um, new worlds, new perspectives. But I think residing in kind of always what you know, and certain guidelines, you end up having this repetitive thought loop that ends up kind of obviously repeating, but it ends up like dulling or damaging your perception of your reality of what you're looking at, not what you're reading or but what you're looking at. And when you have a mind that's repeating in thought, and there's no bridging worlds or going outside of that, and you are consistently in the same environment and in the same area, I think you build this sort of tragedy in your lives, in the individual's life, where the only thing that can save them is a grand story, a grand idea that is so far fetched in comprehension or understanding of, like, how things came to be. But you all, the story is like a symbolic representation of kind of how they have to view their lives in order to approach the inf the kind of the repetition, when you have to approach the repetition of these language models that kind of exist and suffocate people's imagination, and it suffocates and kills their curiosity. um, I think for me in this world, as I grow up and figure it out, I've noticed that I've had to push myself. I wouldn't say I have a stressful life, I really don't. But due to that, I'm talking, I think we're all mentally stressed, right? But I think physically, I think we're so abundant in what we have access to that we forget it. Um, and it's sad, it truly is. But I think I've had to make myself so uncomfortable in certain aspects in order to like enjoy like basic things again. I'm still working on that. Um, because what I think's also happening in this repeating sort of thought loop that I think most people exist in, um, is that that thought loop can contain certain behavioral patterns that are inherited, and you become so desensitized to like luxuries that we now take for granted. But it's just an odd thing to really put together. I wrote, I kind of forgot I wrote this, but I amaze myself every time. Um, but I wrote exploration ceases to exist in a form. I think that also coexists with what I was saying about being curious and how that has an infinite aspect. Um, it's very odd because I have a lot of things in my mind that I can't always say because they're more like abstract ideas of things. I'm like it's like almost pattern recognition in like certain aspects of multiple sort of thoughts that I'm kind of connecting. And it's been a long process of like unraveling that. Um, and the way I just explained that, I think that's what people are not doing. And they're unraveling their minds into like this electric matter or the electric um, exchange of information, however you're expressing yourself or unraveling your mind into the electric, sort of expression. Um, it's sort of you're not putting it anywhere really or into something. Like there's more. Obviously, I think there's a difference between creating and consuming, but when you're consuming, which usually when I talk about the electric matter and electric communication of information, we're all consuming more than we're really creating with it, which I think in itself it's very paradoxical. I think that's a word, contradictive. Um, mm, yeah, sorry, I'm just reading through my work. Mm, I don't know. I remember when I wrote this, or well, the context of it. Um, I was watching a neighbor walk back from the liquor store, and he was walking down the street with like a tall boy in his hand. I think more alcohol in a bag, but he was walking with this. I think the only word you could really use is like intentional swagger. Sort of like, obviously, he's probably drunk, right? But I wrote the lost gesture, performing, holding the act up for absolutely nobody. I think that can encapsulate the mind and the thought loops that exist within our culture, and I think it also ties into what I was just talking about, where um, the mind repeats itself again itself. in what you know, but it is infinitely, but it is infinite in being curious. And sorry, my body's acting weird. I was not gonna throw up there, but I just felt really I had a burp. But what did I write? Yeah. Sorry. But when you're, I think that this act, this gesture act that I see a lot, um, it's so contradictive in the way people talk about it because I think we're all acting in a sense. But I think when you're performing and holding an act up for nobody, you confine yourself to a way of living, and you repeat your thoughts and you repeat this act even if you don't want to do it, and even if you act some different way and behind closed doors or something, it's habitually in almost in a ritualistic way. It's controlling your thoughts. It's kind of dictating the quality of your thoughts first and foremost. But um, you're never in that curious sort of seeker attitude, of the infinity of the seeker, the infinity of being curious. And I see a lot of people just having that gesture act and they're just holding it up for nobody. And I can only be like, does it get tiring to just perform and not, just feel things and to just let the moment take over? I'm not talking about like love and vibes and whatnot. No, no, no. I'm talking about removing this act of like you have to protect everything about yourself. You have to correct people in their assumptions, but I think a true nature of where people should go and change into is a more just direct experience within the present moment where you're not defending anything. You're not competing for something. You're just here curiously seeking, curiously talking, even if I'm tired a little and I'm a little out of it, but I'm in the bliss, I'm in the bliss of expressing, the bliss of not making sense, and the bliss of madness and chaos, or however you want to kind of talk about it. I'm in the bliss of being weird and exploring the weirdness, right? And there needs to be more of this curious seeker attitude in our approach. And I notice more and more each day of all age ranges, people who are fearful of seeking, but they complain about not being sought or never being faced. I will say it does get tired always being the seeker. I hope to meet some seekers.